What would you risk to help a stranger on the side of the road? John Miller chose compassion and paid the price with his job. But what his boss didn't know was that the man John helped once shaped the very company that fired him. This isn't just a story about a mechanic. It's about integrity, mentorship, and how a single good deed can ripple across lives. John Miller's boots tapped steady against the shop floor, his name patch catching the light as he moved past the lift bays. Always early and reliable. At 38, he wasn't flashy, just the guy who got things done. He didn't gossip, didn't cut corners, and didn't mind staying late if it meant finishing a job right. That morning, he was already 2 tickets ahead when Carl's voice cut through the shop like a cold wind. Parts run. East Ridge location. Take the company van. John grabbed the order sheet without a word, but he noticed the tension in Carl's tone. The regional manager had been riding high on rumors of a promotion. Every delay, every mistake, even the small ones, suddenly seemed like personal threats to his spotless record. And John, despite being the best tech on the floor, had no immunity. The sun hung low as John turned onto the old county road connecting the 2 Westline locations. Just a 2-hour loop. Nothing unusual. Then he spotted it. A beat-up green sedan pulled to the shoulder, hood propped open, hazard lights flashing against the dusty trees. A man stood in front, gray-haired and slightly hunched, one hand on the fender, the other shielding his eyes from the sun. John's foot hovered over the gas. He could pretend he hadn't seen it. He could justify staying on schedule. But instead, he slowed, pulling onto the gravel just ahead of the car. He grabbed his toolbox from the van and walked back toward the stranded driver. "You all right, sir?" The man looked up, his face worn but alert. "Could be better. She overheated, or maybe worse." "Pop the hood again. I'll take a look," John said, already rolling up his sleeves. "Appreciate it," the man replied. "Name's Walter. Walter Briggs." John inspected the engine, then crouched beside the wheel well. "Water pump's gone, I think. Your belt's hanging by a thread, too. This isn't a 5-minute fix." Walter let out a sigh and rubbed the back of his neck. "Figures. First time I've taken her this far in months." "You heading somewhere important?" Walter nodded. "Yeah, my daughter's place. First time seeing her in years. Had a falling out back then. I wasn't the easiest man." John paused. "She know you're coming?" Walter smiled faintly. "No, that's the idea." For the next hour, John worked in the fading daylight. They talked about motors, about service bays, about how socket wrenches used to be heavier and better made. Walter revealed he'd once run a motor pool in the Army. Taught green recruits how to strip an engine down to bolts and put it back together blindfolded. Said it kept them alive more than once. "I don't wrench much anymore," Walter admitted. "Back gives out. Hands don't listen." John offered a small grin. "Yeah, but the brain still knows what it's doing. You were quick to diagnose." Walter chuckled. "Comes back. Like muscle memory." By the time John replaced the shredded belt with a spare from his own kit, one meant for another customer, Walter's car rumbled back to life. Not perfect, but enough to get him home. "You sure you won't take anything for this?" Walter asked, reaching for his wallet. John shook his head. "Just promise you'll get it fully checked soon. And good luck with your daughter." Walter hesitated, then extended his hand. "You've already given me more than you know." John drove back in silence, his hands streaked with grease, the specialty belt gone from the inventory he was supposed to deliver. He knew Carl wouldn't like that. Still, he'd do it again. At the shop, the clock was already ticking past shift's end. Carl stood waiting by the office door, arms crossed. "You're 2 hours late," Carl snapped. "And missing a part." There was a man stranded. Older guy. I stopped to help. Carl stepped closer. "You think that's an excuse to delay company property? You were told this route had no margin." John didn't flinch. He could have been out there all night. It wasn't safe. Carl's voice dropped. "You don't make that call, John." "I do. And I'm done with techs who think they can go rogue." A few of the others gathered nearby. One of them, Eric, the 19-year-old apprentice, stepped forward. "He did the right thing," Eric said, his voice cracking slightly. He's the reason I even wanted to do this job. Carl ignored him. John Miller, you're terminated effective immediately. Clear out your tools. For a moment, the shop was dead quiet. Then John slowly nodded, his expression unreadable. No outburst or defense. He simply unzipped his coveralls, folded them neatly, and walked toward his locker. Eric stood frozen, wrench still in hand. His mentor, the one who taught him how to diagnose by sound, how to treat customers with dignity, was being thrown out for doing the one thing that made him worth following. Is this what this place is now? Eric muttered under his breath. Carl didn't answer, but John, just before he walked out the door, turned to Eric. Don't let this make you bitter, kid. Keep your hands steady and your heart clean. And with that, he was gone. The drive to his daughter's house felt longer than it should have. Walter Briggs kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale against the cracked vinyl. The car rattled faintly with every bump, but it ran, thanks to a stranger who had expected nothing in return. He replayed the moment over and over. John's calm patience, the way he'd worked in silence, how he hadn't judged the age of the car or the man behind the wheel. When Walter finally turned onto the quiet suburban street, his heart thudded against his ribs. The house hadn't changed much. Same white shutters, same rose bush his daughter used to trim on Sunday afternoons. He parked by the curb and sat for a moment watching the curtains. Then, he stepped out and walked to the door. Before he could knock twice, the door swung open. "Dad!" She stood there, barefoot on the welcome mat, her hair pulled back, eyes already wide with disbelief. Her voice caught in her throat. "You? What are you doing here?" Walter smiled, small and uncertain. "Figured it was time I stopped making excuses." Tears welled before she could answer. She didn't pull him into a hug right away, but she didn't close the door either. That was enough. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and coffee. A child's backpack was slung over the couch. Photos lined the walls, some of her wedding, one of a boy with a missing tooth. Walter's name was nowhere among them. Dinner was chicken and green beans. Simple, awkward at first, but as the plates emptied, so did the distance between them. Walter told her about the breakdown, about the young mechanic who stopped without being asked. "He wouldn't take $1, Walter said, shaking his head. "Said he just wanted to make sure I got where I was going." His daughter smiled. "Sounds rare these days." "I asked his name. Just John," Walter said. "Didn't get the last one, but he said he worked at a Westline auto shop. Somewhere off Route 42. She tilted her head. "That's funny. I just took my car in last month. Same chain." Walter went quiet. Something in his gut stirred. The timing felt too close. The next morning, before heading back home, Walter stopped at a larger Westline service center just outside town, one of the regional branches. He didn't need the oil change. He just wanted to see how the place was run, how it felt. It looked polished, organized, a far cry from the days he remembered in the army, fixing Humvees in the sand with nothing but pliers and willpower. He took a seat in the waiting lounge while the car was pulled into the bay. An employee walked past with a clipboard, chatting with another tech. "Yeah, some guy at the Ridgewood shop got canned yesterday," the tech said. "Stopped to help some random driver. Manager blew up over it." Walter's ears sharpened. "Used to be their best mechanic too, I heard," the other replied. "Name was John. Miller, maybe?" Walter slowly set his coffee down and stood up. Without saying a word, he stepped outside, leaned against his car, and pulled out an old, scratched flip phone. He scrolled through the numbers, most long out of service. Then he paused at one labeled simply, "Granger." He hit dial. A few rings. Then a clipped, polished voice answered. "Alan Granger." Walter spoke calmly. "It's Briggs." Pause, then a shift in tone. "Sir, I think we have a problem at your company." Across the state at the Ridgewood Westline location, Eric sat alone at his bench, staring at his unopened toolbox. The shop felt colder, quieter. Even though the drills still hummed and the lifts groaned as usual, something was missing, and everyone knew it. Eric tugged at the collar of his coveralls. He'd been avoiding his work for the better part of the morning. Every socket, every wrench reminded him of the person who taught him how to use them. 2 days ago, John had shown him how to trace a misfire just by listening to the engine's rhythm. Not even a checklist, just intuition and experience. And now he was gone. He opened his locker and began packing. One by one, he laid each tool into its foam-lined case. "You don't have to do this," said Daryl, one of the senior techs. He leaned against the locker row, arms folded. Eric didn't look up. "He was the reason I came here, Daryl. I saw a video of him fixing a truck with just a tire iron and duct tape. I thought that's the kind of guy I want to learn from. He made this place better." "No one's arguing that," Daryl said. "But you quitting doesn't fix what happened." Eric zipped the bag. "No, but staying tells me this place is okay with what happened. And it's not." He slung the strap over his shoulder and walked past the lift bays. No one stopped him, but they watched. Inside a downtown corporate tower, Alan Granger sat at his desk, the call from Walter Briggs still fresh in his mind. The name had hit him like a punch. Briggs wasn't just a former motor pool chief. He was the man who taught Alan, then a green second lieutenant, how to rebuild a diesel engine in under 2 hours. The man who barked at him until he got his timing right, who drilled into him that leadership wasn't about titles, but about how you showed up when no one was watching. And now, that same man was telling him one of his own had been fired for showing the values he had once been taught. Alan pressed the intercom. "Get me the Ridgewood personnel file for John Miller, and flag the manager. I want to visit that site." Unannounced. At the Ridgewood shop, Carl stood in the break room, straightening his collar in the microwave reflection. A memo had arrived, a vague notice that someone from executive leadership would be stopping by in the next few days. Carl assumed it was about the promotion. His numbers were clean. His audits had passed. John's firing, he figured, would be seen as decisive, a leader protecting company time and inventory. He practiced his smile. Short, controlled, enough charm to impress, but not enough to seem desperate. He had no idea what was really coming. 3 days had passed since John Miller walked out of the Ridgewood shop for the last time, or so everyone thought. The mood on the floor was quieter now, tense but oddly expectant. Whispers passed between toolboxes and beneath engine bays. Something was coming. The memo from corporate had arrived without details, but it had been enough to put Carl on high alert. He'd shown up that morning in a tailored gray suit, a stark contrast to the oil-stained uniforms around him, and had spent the last hour pretending not to glance at the parking lot every 3 minutes. "Probably here to confirm my numbers," he said aloud to no one in particular. New quarters looking strong, but his jokes fell flat. No one laughed, not even Daryl. Carl adjusted his tie in the glass of the vending machine and took a deep breath. He was ready. After all, wasn't he the one who kept the branch running on time? Who took tough decisions when others hesitated? Then a visiting car pulled into the lot. It wasn't marked, but the vehicle's clean lines and tinted windows gave it presence. Pause swept the shop. The air stilled. A few mechanics peeked out from the bays. The back door opened. Out stepped a man in his mid-50s, sharp features underlined by age, posture crisp and purposeful. He wore no tie, just a black jacket over a gray button-down. But the way he walked made it clear he was in charge long before Carl reached the door. "Mr. Granger," Carl called out, forcing a wide smile. "We've been expecting." Alan Granger didn't stop. He didn't shake hands. He walked right past Carl and into the shop like he'd been there 100 times before. Inside, every conversation stopped. The sound of drills, clanking metal, even the shop radio, all faded under his presence. He turned to the group. "I'm looking for the man who was fired for helping a stranded driver. John Miller." No one spoke at first. Then Daryl stepped forward, slowly wiping his hands on a rag. "He's not here anymore," Daryl said. "Carl let him go 3 days ago." Alan nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here." From across the room, Eric stepped out from behind the alignment bay, unsure at first if he should speak. But Alan noticed him immediately. The nervous energy, the reddened eyes, the hesitance of someone not used to being listened to. "You worked with him?" Alan asked. Eric nodded. "Yeah, he was the reason I stayed in this trade." Alan's gaze didn't waver. "Tell me." So Eric told him. Not just about the firing, but about the days leading up to it. The time John spent after hours helping him troubleshoot brake systems. The way he taught respect without ever raising his voice. How the shop changed the moment he was gone. Alan listened, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Then he thanked Eric with a single, quiet, "I appreciate your honesty." He turned toward the office. "Carl." Inside. "Now." Carl followed, pale beneath the collar of his designer shirt. The door shut behind them with a click. Inside the small office, the air was heavier. And sitting in the corner, leaning calmly against the filing cabinet, was Walter Briggs. Carl froze. "You remember Sergeant Briggs?" Alan asked, pulling out a chair but not sitting. Carl cleared his throat. We haven't been introduced." Walter stood. "We have now." Alan turned, his voice quiet but firm. "Walter trained me, Carl. He taught me how to lead under pressure. How to think like a mechanic but act like an officer. I owe my career to him." Carl shifted, hands twitching slightly. "Look, I didn't know." "No, you didn't," Alan interrupted. "You didn't ask questions. You didn't look at the man's record. You didn't even stop to listen to your own staff." He took a breath, measured. "This isn't just about John. It's about how you've been running this place, the complaints, the dismissals, the way you push out good techs because you feel threatened. You're not managing a team. You're managing fear." Carl opened his mouth again, but Alan held up a hand. "You're done here." Carl's eyes flicked toward Walter, then toward the window, where the whole shop seemed to be watching. He straightened his shoulders one last time, collected his things in silence, and walked out the side door. Alan stayed behind, arms crossed, taking a long moment before reaching for his phone. John Miller was underneath his old Dodge Ram when the call came. He almost didn't hear the buzz over the creak of the creeper wheels. When he saw the number, he hesitated. "Alan Granger," the voice said. "I need you back at Ridgewood." John wiped his hands on a towel. "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "I am," Alan replied. "You were fired for doing the right thing. That's on us. I want to make it right, not just with words." He continued, firm but respectful. "I want you to return as lead technician and technical trainer. You'll oversee not just Ridgewood, but our apprentice program across the region. You'll shape how we bring up the next generation." John didn't answer right away. He looked out at the yard, at the old van he was halfway through restoring. He'd been at peace these last few days, but also restless, like a good tool left unused. "When do you need me?" "Today," Alan said. John smiled faintly. "Then I'll see you soon." When the shop door opened later that afternoon, no one expected it. But there he was, walking through the service bay like nothing had changed, except everything had. Same shirt, same steady steps. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were clear, confident. Eric stood frozen, mouth half open. He dropped the socket wrench he was holding. John looked over, nodded once. "You leaving or getting back to work?" Eric blinked, then grinned, wide and stunned. "Getting back to work." He turned and jogged to his locker, grabbing the tools he hadn't touched in days. Daryl clapped a hand on his shoulder, chuckling. Across the floor, the rest of the crew began to gather. The boss they trusted was back. Not the manager, the leader. And in the small corner office, Alan Granger watched it all quietly, knowing the company had just begun to remember who it was. By the end of the first week, the Ridgewood shop felt like a different place. The sound of tools still echoed through the bays, tires still squealed on the alignment rollers, and grease still stained the floor, but the energy had changed. There was laughter again, cautious at first, then easier. People moved with purpose, but without fear. John Miller had returned not just to a title, but to a mission. As lead technician and technical trainer, his days were filled with check-ins, problem-solving, and coaching. He no longer had to choose between fixing cars and shaping people. Now he did both. He began every morning with a walkthrough, greeting each tech by name, checking on projects, listening. Not inspecting, listening. And when a mistake happened, and it always did somewhere, he didn't bark. He taught. He'd crouch beside the tech, walk them through what went wrong, and explain how to prevent it next time. Fix the problem, not the blame, he'd say. That's how shops get better. Eric was the first to notice how different it felt. He had unpacked his tools the same day John returned, but by midweek, he was staying late on his own, volunteering for night shifts, watching over the new apprentices like he used to watch John. On Wednesday, he stayed until nearly midnight helping a junior tech swap out a radiator. When the kid thanked him, Eric only shrugged, just passing it forward. The bay doors rolled open earlier than usual the following Friday. Morning light poured in, golden and soft, washing over the concrete like a welcome mat. John was halfway through checking parts inventory when he heard the low rumble of an older engine pulling into the lot. It was a car he recognized by presence. The same green sedan, faded and humble, rolled to a stop just outside Bay 3. The driver's door opened slowly, and Walter Briggs stepped out, wearing a tan jacket and a cap pulled low against the sun. He wasn't limping. He wasn't carrying tools. He walked with calm purpose, something tucked under his arm. John stepped out from the office and met him halfway. Walter didn't speak right away. He simply held out the item he carried. A small, handcrafted wooden plaque. Mounted at its center was a worn metal license plate, bent slightly at the corners. The paint faded but legible. JB67. Came off my old field Jeep, Walter said. Back when we used to rebuild engines in tents under floodlights half a world away. John accepted it with both hands, eyes fixed on the metal. I kept it all these years, Walter continued. It isn't worth much, but she always helped me remember who I was, where I learned what service really means. John looked up, his voice quiet. Do you want to hang it here? Walter gave a faint smile. Yes, I saw that same spirit again, right here, and I figured, maybe it's time it lived somewhere it still matters. And they sealed this passage with a handshake, firm, respectful, enduring. From across the shop, Eric watched. He didn't approach. He just understood. 3 men stood there, one just starting out, one rebuilding, one reflecting, all drawn together by one choice made on the shoulder of an empty road. The plaque went up that afternoon, mounted on the back wall of the shop above the tool station. Not flashy, but everyone saw it, and everyone understood what it stood for. A reminder that character still has a place in a world too quick to forget it. This story reminds us that character isn't built in comfort. It's revealed in small, difficult choices. Would you have risked your job for a stranger on the side of the road? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, please give it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that matter.